Hi there. We all probably know someone who's either been in or is currently in a toxic relationship. I've always been curious as to what causes toxic relationships and why someone would stay in one even though it's very obvious from the outside that it's not healthy. So in this video we're going to be looking at what exactly is a toxic relationship, why certain individuals are drawn to toxic people, what are the traits that actually cause the toxicity to take place and manifest, and some of the solutions that you can look at to be able to resolve or even escape from a toxic relationship. So starting with the definition, the word toxic can kind of mean different things to different people, but broadly speaking, a toxic relationship consists of one or several of these traits. Name calling, insults or put downs, controlling behaviour such as monitoring your partner's phone, isolating you from your friends or family, emotional or physical abuse, and ego-driven conflict and competition. So toxicity can extend beyond this list of traits, but these are some of the core ideas and core symptoms of a toxic relationship. But you kind of have to use your own judgment to work out to what extent things are unbearably toxic, or if it's something that kind of requires communication and some kind of resolution to improve your relationship. For example, name calling and insults could be done in a kind of light-hearted way intended to be taken as a joke, and competition could be done in a friendly and healthy manner such as playing sports together and so on. So why are some people attracted either knowingly or unknowingly towards people who possess toxic traits? Well, one of the main reasons stems from your childhood, and that is that we gravitate in general towards familiarity rather than what is perceived to be healthy or a kind of loving relationship. Often we do this without realizing, but if we grew up in a toxic household or one with high levels of stress, then in a kind of weird, convoluted way, we tend to seek this out in our future relationships and domestic environments. This is often because the template or perception that we have of love is something that we learned as a child. So if we learn that love is something that's volatile, that has ups and downs, and that on one day it's very good and on another day it's very toxic, then these are learned beliefs, and this is something that can often stay with us into adulthood unless you end up dealing with it, often through a therapist. So the only solution really is to understand this natural tendency of ours and to realize that familiarity often trumps love. The next reason why people seek out toxic behavior is for excitement. However, people often confuse excitement for emotional volatility, and this is what leads to that kind of roller coaster effect where some days are good, some days are bad, and it's very stressful, but in some kind of weird way, it's also very exciting and thrilling. So the next reason why people seek out toxic behavior is for the challenge. And this comes in two different forms. The first is the kind of more generic variant where nobody really likes a pushover, so they want someone who can give a little bit of friction back to the relationship rather than being so kind of dominant that you never get any pushback and therefore you're never being truly challenged either mentally, emotionally or intellectually in the relationship. Obviously this type of challenge doesn't inherently have to be toxic, but often when you take this desire a little bit too far, it kind of manifests itself in toxicity. The other type of challenge which is associated with toxicity more specifically, and that is where one person in the relationship sees the other person as quote unquote broken, and they see the other person or their partner as some kind of personal project to work on or fix, often to make themselves feel better and in some cases to alleviate their own personal issues. While it might seem like a nice idea in theory to kind of help someone and go out of your way to take care of someone and help them develop, often if you have not looked after yourself first, or that help towards the other person is at the expense of your own personal health, then it's just not worth it, and it often leads to the kind of toxicity that you're trying to avoid. With these types of examples, I often think back to the airplane analogy, and in the event of an emergency, you're told to tend to your own needs first, especially with something like an oxygen mask, before looking after someone else. This is because if you're not able to take care of yourself first, then it's going to be very difficult to take care of someone else. But more generally, you'll have more to give if you have more resources, or emotional stability, or strength, or health, and so on. The next reason why people seek out toxicity is a little bit more gender specific, but it's when people confuse masculinity with toxicity. This is what leads to, at least in the UK, what is known as the bad boy. People are often drawn to individuals who exhibit certain qualities typically associated with masculinity or being an alpha male. But like I said, there's often a fine line between what some people consider to be masculine and what some people consider to be toxic, and often these are kind of lumped under the same umbrella, and that then gets referred to as toxic masculinity. For example, aggression can often be associated with masculinity, but aggression doesn't inherently have to be destructive. You could be aggressive in your goals, your career, your pursuits, your opinions, and so on. But if you venture too far into the aggressive territory, or you lose control of that aggression, then that's what gives rise to violent or antisocial behavior. Like a lot of masculine traits, they don't inherently have to be toxic. It's just that some people find it difficult to separate the toxicity from the broader trait itself. And people are attracted to this broader trait for very deep-rooted and primal reasons. So what exactly causes toxicity to occur in a relationship? Well, the first reason, which I've already alluded to, is your childhood influence or childhood trauma. So I've made a couple of videos already, both short form and long form, that kind of delve into some of these ideas. But one of the main ones is what's called attachment theory. In summary, attachment theory is a set of beliefs and behaviors that are formed in your childhood that affects the perspective that you have about your partner. There are usually 3 different types or 3 different styles of attachment, and they are securely attached, anxiously attached, and avoidantly attached. One of the unique combinations is when someone who is anxiously attached ends up in a relationship with someone who is avoidantly attached. This is because each of these styles ends up exacerbating and provoking the issues in the other style. Another reason, which loosely fits under the category of childhood, but also has some kind of genetic influence as well, is personality disorders. So if you or your partner has some kind of personality disorder, such as borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, this can often cause tensions in the relationship, and the other person can find it increasingly difficult to connect with their partner, and this is what leads to long-term resentment. Another factor that can influence toxicity in a relationship is a lack of emotional maturity or a lack of emotional intelligence. Some people consider these 2 things to be roughly the same, but I like to distinguish the 2 in the following way. So emotional maturity is quite closely related to emotional stability and wisdom, in that as you get older, you start to become more aware of the consequences of your actions and also become more informed about the important things and how to hold on to them. Emotional intelligence, on the other hand, is more about being able to recognize your own internal emotional state and to be able to distinguish between the different kinds of emotions and recognize them. This applies not only towards yourself, but also to others. So it's equally helpful to be able to understand your own emotional state so you're able to communicate that to your partner, but also to have some insight into what your partner might be feeling on a given time, and then to be able to cater to those needs. With these definitions, then it becomes more obvious that if you lack either emotional intelligence or emotional maturity, that it can cause issues and frictions in the relationships that will potentially even cause the relationship to deteriorate over time. Another factor that can cause toxicity to increase, or at least make it harder to resolve issues, is a lack of relationship knowledge. This is just another way of saying expectation management, because if what you expect from a relationship doesn't actually align with reality, then this can often cause tensions later on. I've already made some past videos on relationships, some of the common issues, and some of the things that you can look for in a potential partner to kind of give you the best chances of having a healthy relationship. The next factor is low self-esteem, and this is quite an important one, not just in terms of getting into a toxic relationship, but also this is what will prevent you from leaving one. Fundamentally, if you come into the world of dating and relationships with the idea or mindset that you're not worthy of having a decent partner, then it's probably going to be the case that you're going to struggle to find one. Alternatively, you might already be in a relationship with someone who has very toxic traits, and obviously if you don't have very high self-esteem, then you might believe that this is exactly what you deserve. This feeling can be exacerbated or enhanced if you struggle with uncertainty in general. So people with a very strong fear of uncertainty are far less likely to take positive and healthy actions. So what are the solutions with toxic relationships? So the first one is humility, and if you're not able to entertain the possibility that you're at least partly responsible for this dynamic, then it's going to be very hard to change it. So this humility could be taking accountability or being the person who makes the first move in order to be able to make things better. The next one is a good rule of thumb, and that is be the kind of partner that you would want to have. This applies more to values than it does specifics, so it's not to say that you should go for someone who you're attracted to on a specific level, but more in terms of the kinds of things that you would think makes a good partner in general. The only caveat to this is to have enough self-respect to know when you're trying and making effort, but your partner won't reciprocate. In this instance, you might want to look at something a little bit more drastic, such as couples counselling. This allows you to work through your issues in an open and supportive manner with someone who is an unbiased mediator. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about couples counselling is that people often see it as some massive failure on their part And if you go down this route, then you're acknowledging that the relationship is doomed to fail. But it's only after going through this process that you can truly appreciate the value that comes from trying it. The last solution or strategy is often one of the hardest to acknowledge or action, but it can also be the most necessary, especially with toxic relationships, and that is knowing when to walk away. If you can be honest with yourself and say that you've made many attempts to try and improve things, you've given your partner many chances, and they haven't reciprocated, or they're not putting the effort in, and that toxicity kind of prevails, then there's a very good chance that the best solution and only solution is to walk away from the relationship and to put yourself first in this scenario. Obviously, relationships are tough, and it does require mutual effort, attention, dedication, trust, and honesty. And if these things are just not there, then it's going to be very hard to salvage it. It's true that it's very difficult to know what the correct decision is, and that's why I'm a big believer in building up your knowledge, and this could be through reading or watching videos or speaking to an expert or therapist. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably leave it there, and I will see you in the next one.